answering three main questions regarding the book that we're in. Okay, and you'll see them up on the screen. If you can see them. Okay, so how is the book important at this particular time? In its specific time, what place did it have? How did God use it to fulfill a purpose? Number one. Number two, how does this book fit into God's redemptive plan? So if you overview the Bible, you're going to see that there's one main storyline going on, and that's redemption. In its biggest term, it could be redemption of creation, it could be redemption of a person or people, it could be redemption of everything, redemption of the universe, right? So redemption is the key word that covers all of these books. So we're trying to see, how does this book fit into that redemption plan? What does it tell us about redemption? And then lastly, number three, how does this book point toward Messiah? And that's another thing you'll notice. Every book in some way is going to be pointing forward in the Old Testament toward Jesus, toward the coming Messiah, because that's the whole point. That's the means of redemption, right? So we're asking that as another question. How is this doing that? How is this accomplishing that? So we're going to talk about those today as we go along. Let's see if I can get this out of the way. I think you can see it with the map. Let's see a little bit. There we go. Okay, a little smaller. So far what we've seen, in Genesis, we saw God create. So everything is created and initiated in Genesis, right? However, biblically, man just screws it up. Right from the start. The first thing he does wrong is murder another human being. It's not even like little theft or it's murdering your brother, for crying out loud. He murders his own brother, right?
Was the apple first?
So okay. After that, that's a fair point. Eating the apple, disobeying, and then from there it's just downhill slide from there. Okay. And then as you look through Genesis, you'll notice every generation just continues this trend, screwing it all up, ruining everything. You have this perfect situation and you just ruin it from that point forward. And you discover this point right down here at the bottom. That God is holy, but man is unholy. There's just no getting around that. But we've talked a lot in this class and other classes that we've taught and other people have taught about one of the main probably errors, for lack of a better term, that people in this world seem to commit is this belief that man is innately good. Right? And if you start from the premise man is innately good, you're going to be wrong from that point forward. You're already wrong. And I don't mean invaluable. Not at all what I mean. Man is definitely valuable, obviously. I mean morally, man is corrupt. We're just corrupt. We're going to do the wrong thing every time given a choice. Okay? So that's what we have to start with, is understanding that only God is holy, absolutely holy, no error of any kind. Man is unholy and it's going to commit errors all the time. All right. I want to stick this into your head at the beginning, but it's going to play out through the whole rest of Leviticus. And that's the concept of holy, meaning set apart. Okay. So holiness has the picture of seeing a crowd of people and picking a person, two people, whatever, however many number of people, for a specific purpose, right? And you're going to see it specifically when we get into this in the priesthood, because people are picked for the priesthood, or a tribe is picked for the priesthood, okay? And that's the concept of holiness. I gave you some funny, ideas down there, the best looking avocado, you want a nice holiday wreath or something, or so you pick the best pine cone, that kind of thing. You pick out your best suit or dress. That one chip when you get potato chips that has all the spices loaded with the burrito. Remember Rosie?
Yes.
We had a student in one of the ministries I ran, and she just gave life to everything. So we nicknamed her. Well, I nicknamed her the spicy Dorito. She was that one that just loaded with spice, because everything about her was spicy. So that's kind of the concept of holiness, is setting apart something for a higher transcendent meaning or transcendent purpose. So with that in mind, we move on. We continued on Genesis to Exodus, and from the last week. And that is that God is now setting apart his people in order to create something special. Okay, so he's pulling his people out. He's taking them out of Egypt, getting them out of there, and setting them apart for a purpose that will manifest later on. Okay. Excuse me. In the future, God will use this holiness to create a means for man to be reconciled to him. I think I didn't give it yet, but I'll give you an analogy later on. So you follow my logic? That's what Exodus is doing. Now we're going to pull you out because we're going to use Israel later for a higher purpose, to pull you out. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, because had Egypt stayed, or excuse me, had the Israelites stayed in Egypt, the corruption would have continued. They went from Joseph's line, which was this, the children of Jacob, very much believers in God. They did a lot of wrong, but they very much tried to honor God. And now you're 400 some years later, and they're just completely corrupt. If you look at Exodus, you see the corruption. I mean, how many days or weeks is it before they get in before they're already making an idol and saying, send us back. We liked Egypt better. At least we had food there. They don't see what's going on. What's going on is God saying, okay, I'm going to do something later. So right now I got to pull you out. I'm going to take you out. Okay. So Leviticus is I'm going to have to say that word a lot today. Leviticus is going to begin this process by showing them how to live in a way. Not only are you now pulled out of Egypt, but how are you going to live in such a way that you're set apart as a people group, different from everybody else for a higher purpose. Okay. Leviticus is arranged in an interesting way. I'll show you a better graph here later on, and it's on your paper too, but it's hard to read a little bit. But this is not uncommon if you read through scripture, for there to be very symmetrical method to the writing that was done by Hebrew people. So what you see in the book of Leviticus is you see this little intro at the very beginning, and then you see what it does, and the arrows kind of indicate the direction, but it becomes sort of cyclical in that sense. So it starts talking about rituals, right? So rituals that man has to accomplish and get through. And then the priesthood, he's going to set apart a priesthood. Remember, this is the first time. So we're setting apart a people for the priesthood, and what's involved with that, right? And then down to purity, and that involves like personal purity and group purity and that type of thing. And then right in the middle, before it mirrors itself back the other direction, is the Day of Atonement, right in the center. The Day of Atonement is going to be key to understanding the future aspect of what Leviticus is trying to get across to us, right? Not just the right now, but what's the whole point of this? So it takes this circle then, starts this way, all the way around rituals, priest, purity, back, and then it goes back in reverse, purity, priest, rituals, back. There's a little bit of an outro at the end, but it's fairly well related to everything we're talking about. So let's look at Leviticus 1:1, and I want you to notice how it begins. Let me get there myself. Yep. Okay, Leviticus. I don't know if you have the Logos app on your phone. Logos, Logos, Logos. But it's a very good app. Very easy to use, easy to write your own notes in, make highlights in. You can do multiple screens. I can show you this way if I can go, yeah. So if you have 2 or 3 books open, you want to cross-reference, you can kind of slide back and forth, that kind of thing. So 1:1. Somebody want to read that? Just read 1:1 for me.
Let me read it. I got it right here handy. Now the Lord called to Moses and spoke to him from the tabernacle of meeting, saying.
That's good. Perfect. Thank you. So it starts out that God is somehow resident within this tent or this tabernacle, okay? And he's speaking from the tabernacle out to Moses, who is outside of the tabernacle, okay? The idea within that simple statement at the beginning is that man is not capable yet of dwelling with God. So God is dwelling inside that tent and speaking outside to Moses. Moses is not in that tent yet. right? And whether or not that's physical or symbolic, it doesn't really matter. The symbolic is more important in this case. Symbolically, Leviticus is showing that right from the beginning, Moses is not capable of having any kind of union with God in the sense of being in the tent with him, being in with him. And that, by the way, is what's going to get solved in the book of Leviticus. You can solve that problem. It's going to show you, here's a solution for taking care of that issue of the fact that we can't be together, okay? So man is not yet able to be in God's presence. Right? So to stand in the presence of God, you can't do it yet, right? You got to find a way to do that. The problem is that holiness and unholiness, issue, that problem that we've got, that big rift, and it showed you up here, like that, the big chasm right here. So you've got God on the one side, this chasm of holiness that can't be crossed, and man over here on the other side. So when God to join man, for those two to be able to connect together, is going to take something. It's going to involve something. So let's talk about those rituals, and you'll see as I spoke earlier about how they're sort of cyclical. You'll see it in two places. One is in chapters 1-7, and then later at the end, chapters 22-25. So I don't know if I gave you a spot to write that. No, I think I just wrote it in for you. There you go. Can you read that? Yeah, you can kind of read that. So the rituals take place, and here let's talk about what those rituals involve right there. Okay. Excuse me. Rituals describe the specific ways that Israelites could express themselves to God. All right. So the beginnings of relationship. Right. First off, we got to figure out how we're going to talk to each other. How we're going to understand each other, and that's where rituals come in. Let's just look real briefly. Keep Leviticus 1 open, and we'll look a little bit. It starts right at 3, I believe. Yeah, it does. Okay. And it's just real specific instructions on what types of rituals are you to commit in order to understand, for us to understand each other. Okay. We start, for instance, in verse 3, burnt offering regulations. So you're going to offer burnt offerings, and here is specifically how you're going to do it. So, I'd have to get into the mind of God to understand this. The specifics of why he does things the exact way he does them is an oddity to me. Maybe some commentators have theorized on why, but that he's doing it and the end or the purpose for which he's doing it is pretty clear. That's what we're discussing, is that bridging that gap of holiness to unholiness. Okay. So let me look at another couple here. Let's see. Okay, here's verse 10. I'm going by section. I'm reading from the Net Bible. It's called NET, Net Bible. If the offering is from the flock for a burnt offering from the sheep or goats, it has to be a flawless male, and must slaughter it on the north side of the altar before the Lord. And the sons of Aaron, the priests, will splash its blood against the altar sides. Down to 14. If the offering is a burnt offering from the birds, he must present its offering from the turtle doves or the young pigeons. Okay. So all of these are going to end up getting grouped into types of offerings. Okay. And you're going to see two main types in chapters 1-7. Offerings for fellowship and offerings for sin. Another way of saying that, the way the Leviticus Bible Project video says it, is thanks and I'm sorry. Okay. We're developing a preliminary childlike relationship from the very beginning. Thank you and I'm sorry. Those are the first two things. So fellowship, how are we going to find each other? You're going to find a lot of the rituals have to do with that. How are we going to understand each other? The specifics that I talked about, the north side, the blood has to go here. It has to be cut this way. All that kind of specific stuff. I don't know why he does it. You guys have any thoughts on why he might be so specific in the way in which these rituals are handled? Any thoughts?
Mine would only be that they were male, because you don't want to sacrifice a female, but the other.
Yes.
I'm actually looking for obedience.
Yeah.
Yeah, you think so?
Mhm.
That's my first reaction, because I just figure I want them to do it exactly this way. It may be, I was trying to think, not having kids is I can't give you an exact example, but I think when you teach a child to do something, aren't you pretty specific? You want the, you're gonna butter the bread for the first time. Aren't you really specific? You gotta scoop this amount, and you gotta do this, and you're teaching the child. Is that close? Am I close to that?
Mhm.
Yeah, so you're teaching this person how to do it. The meaning of each individual thing, that maybe that can come later, maybe they'll find it themselves. Maybe they'll see the purpose for scooping the butter this way or whatever. Maybe they'll understand it later, but right now it's just do it this way. You're not gonna understand why, but just do it this way.
And I think as parents, many of us have said, do it as I said.
Yeah.
As I said,
Because I said so. Because I said so.
Even if there's in worship in the Bible talks about gathering together, singing songs, joining in prayer, and then the teaching of the word.
yeah,
What do we do when we go in the sanctuary?
yeah,
Half an hour or so.
right.
We're
That's a
gonna
good
sing,
point.
we're
That's
gonna
a-
pray, we're gonna have to hear John teach from the pulpit.
Right.
I mean, it's. Well, someone says, how come all the churches do it this way? They all have the same
Right,
order of it, because that's what the Bible says
Yeah.
to do. I mean,
yeah, that's a good point. There are sometimes when you just have to do it, like you're told to do it. And maybe later you'll understand it, and maybe right now you understand it. Whatever the case, you just do it the way you're told to do it, at least for now.
Yeah.
It's just a good symbol of whether or not you're an obedient child at all. So did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, two things come to my mind. One is, even in, Exodus, when he talks about tabernacle, the furnishing, how to lay out, what goes where,
Yeah,
the point of the priesthood's, garment and all of that. I mean, down to the detail.
yeah,
We wonder what is all that about, but there is always, it points to the great priest.
Yes.
later on, right? So even though we may not understand all the little nuances why he does, that is up to God, because he's God,
yes,
right? And so that is one point of thought. And the
That's
second thought is what Diane said. Last week, actually, I read a quote from Chuck Swindoll's book about, putting the blood. So it doesn't make sense
oh, yeah,
at all, right?
Uh-huh.
The dry blood on the door post. It doesn't, logically, it doesn't make sense,
Yeah.
but what he's looking for is do not debate, do not question, just
Yeah.
obey.
Yeah.
Right? And I think there's my second thought that why he does, and okay, I lied, one more thing. God is so sovereign, yet he is God of details.
yes,
I
right,
mean, we will see in the book of Numbers,
yes,
as well as in Leviticus. The details
yeah,
that he goes through is just mind boggling.
yeah. Are you doing numbers next time?
No, Dawn,
Dawn is?
yeah.
I was telling, I know, Dawn, I don't express this to you, but, the first time, who's read through the Bible all the way?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. Oh, yeah, that's very good. You get to Numbers and you just go, ugh. Because you peeked at it and you go, oh, yeah, of this clan, there were this many people in this family. And you go, oh my gosh, this is like reading an accounting book,
yeah, but it's the most interesting one of the whole thing.
right? Yeah, especially if you're an accountant. No, but I mean,
I
what I got out of it is exactly what you just said. The first couple of times I read through it, what I got out of it is that the detail of what he knows and what he wants you to know that he knows is amazing. I want you to know, I know exactly how many people there are in this family line. Exactly. And I'm gonna list it for you all the way through. So whether or not you're you read it and you're going, ugh, which is understandable, you at least get that out of it at the end. You at least get, wow, he really cares. Same with the temple. He really cares. I want pomegranates here, and they gotta be in this shape. Wow, interesting that he really cares that much,
Well, typically, and a lot of people think praying is letting God know what's happening in your life.
Yeah.
What's happening,
Yeah.
and God's, through most of that part of praying, God's like, I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like when the little kid walks up to you while you're doing a building project and says, Dad, that's a hammer.
Yeah,
I'm aware of that. Thank you. So yeah, that's kind of what he's getting at with these. He wants to He wants to establish a way for you to say those two things to him at least. And to express those concepts to him. I know I did wrong. And thank you, those concepts, okay? You'll notice that as we kind of saw, we talked about very specific instructions. And that each of them requires sacrifice. Okay? Right. Specificity, exactly. Right, each of them require sacrifice. So you gotta think about an agrarian society 3,500 years-ish ago. A male goat or whatever was able to procreate in a very high way, especially when you say, I want you to take the best male goat, the flawless one. That's a huge sacrifice. If you just walk up and say, grab me a goat, I don't care which one, you're gonna get the cruddy one. the one that can't reproduce or something, or has some scabs on it, or something's wrong. Well, we don't need this, it's not much of a loss. He's saying, grab the best one of the thing. The best one, because I want you to understand that this is gonna hurt, right? That's what he's trying to establish, this understanding of cost with regard to your sin, okay? So all of them require sacrifice, that's gonna be important. So why rituals? Rituals give an object lesson, right? They establish a way for you to visually see, not just hear, but see what it is you're doing. And the more senses that are engaged in learning, the more you understand the concept, right? So it's not only telling you don't do this, it's don't do this, and now here's what it costs you. And I want you to specifically take the male goat and cut it, or the lamb or the bird, whatever. I want you to chop it this way and segment it and put it here. Because there's a visual that's going to play out later for them as time goes by and the more they understand their relationship with God and the organization of God, that kind of thing. Okay, so object lessons. This is kind of goes to that saying, but some people have a hard time deriving meaning just from words, right? So yeah, some people, and God knows this, can hear it, but they don't grasp it, but they need to see it. So now you've got hearing and seeing all together. You've got every realm of learning. God knows how to teach. Let's just say that. Okay. And then the second set of those, I'm not up there anymore, but the second set, the later set of rituals has a slightly different nuance to it, and it has to do with feasts. Okay. So now you go from just the rituals of like sacrifice to feasts, and feasts are joyful. Tons of food. Are you kidding me? I love that. A bunch of food on the table out there. And God's attitude toward feasts was maybe a little bit of somberness, but generally eat, drink, and have some fun. Dance. Do whatever you want. This is good. This is fun time. Okay. So I think he wants to understand, or wants us to understand, that not only am I a God who requires something, but I also want you to have fun. I want you to enjoy this place. Right? Excuse me. So he establishes these feasts on a yearly schedule too, by the way, so that now you have something to look forward to. Yeah, next year we're going to do another one of these. All right. So go ahead, Don.
I was just gonna say, last Sunday we had baptisms.
Yeah.
John didn't get up and go, oh, by the way, I want everybody to know, yesterday, Saturday morning, we had a couple baptisms here.
That's a good point. Yeah.
It's part of the
Right
service.
before the service. By the way, everybody, we baptized some people, so
Right.
hope you like that. Right. See it. And baptism is a great example because there's a visual representation of death and rebirth involved in baptism, right? Okay. Everybody on track now, or are we on here? I think we're on the second page already. Yes, we are. Okay. I know I'm going fast. I understand. I know you know that I go fast. So beyond rituals, let me go back to. I think I forgot something. There we go. This is where these are out of place. So we're at priests now, and there's the chapters for priests if you want to write that down. Already written down.
You wrote it for us.
I did, yes, you're right. Okay. So priests become intermediaries. Priests are the go-betweens, right? You've got this absolutely perfectly holy God on one side of the rift and dirty, unholy man. And there has to be a way for somebody to go between, but it has to be somebody specific who can handle, the holiness of God, can approach the holiness of God without getting destroyed. So you're gonna see all these really specific and stringent demands for priests. You have to be holy. You're gonna come in my presence. You can't come dirty. You gotta come holy, right? The analogy, if we'd have been able to watch the video, it's a good one, is it's kind of like the sun. It's wonderful. You get up there, of course, you don't stare at it, but it's up there, it gives light to everything. It's wonderful, but get yourself in a rocket ship. And the closer and closer and closer you get to the sun, the hotter it's gonna get. You can't get close enough too close to the sun. You can't do it. You're gonna die, right? It's similar to the holiness of God, although the analogy is weak in some senses, but it's similar in the sense that there's this absolutely holy God. And we can't come close to him because we will die if we get too close, right? So there has to be an intermediary introduced, someone between who can relay messages or take care of things for you in behalf of this holy God, okay? So priests act as intermediaries, right? So there's a good example for you right from the beginning. Aaron is appointed to be the first priest. Then, of course, his sons, the second priests, already completely screw it up. And if you remember the story, they're just selfish. They're just selfish and fleshly and, you know, like all of us are really, but they just do something really dumb and it ends up getting them killed. And it shows you from the beginning that even priests are not going to be perfect. You know, Pastor John is literally perfect.
So he says.
I checked it
Right,
out. He is
Yeah.
literally.
Yeah,
Say that to him and he'll laugh in your face.
I know he will.
So yeah, so just the whole point being that even priests are going to have this lack. But if you go through Leviticus, and we're not going to, you know, this isn't a study of the actual words of the book. This is an overview. If you look through 8 and 10 and 21 through 22, you'll see the stringent requirements of priesthood, sexual purity, physical purity, abstention from sin, whatever that word is. Okay, I wrote that down, but for the sake of time, we're going to skip reading a little bit right now. Very high integrity is involved. Okay, and if you just read through a little bit of those things, and by the way, I'd suggest if you really want to get something out of Sunday school, read the book before the week that we teach it. We're not on no Sunday school next week.
No, there is.
There is?
Yeah, Don's teaching.
Oh, I thought that was 2 weeks from now.
No.
Oh, I thought we said we weren't doing it. Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Oh, we can do it 2 weeks ago.
So you're gonna.
We
2 weeks
won't
in
be
a row?
on Zoom though.
That's what it is.
It won't be on Zoom.
Yeah, that's what I'm remembering then.
So no Zoom next week, but
Okay.
there is Sunday school.
No Zoom. Sorry for Zoom people.
So it'll really be crowded in.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Oh, that'd be awesome. So, okay, my apologies. We are on next week.
Number,
It's just
and
no
I'm
Zoom.
teaching 2 weeks.
We haven't decided who's doing admin yet.
Oh, that's right. We do admin after that, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. We're really on top of things, people. We'll figure it out. It's not a major issue. We figure it out. Okay, and then this third portion is purity. Okay, you'll see that in chapters 11 through 15 and 18 through 20. And this is having to do with how do you remain pure? And how do you make yourself pure? Again, the whole point being you've got to be pure to enter into God's presence, right? Are you catching the metaphor of purity now and the need for a Messiah? We're going to discuss that, right? 11 through 15, describing the process for keeping the body pure, food, bodily cleanliness, impure bodily fluids. It gets pretty graphic in there about what to do, what to touch and not to touch, and how to dispose of a dead body and what to do during, that time of the month and that kind of thing. It's all in there, right? It's a very adult book to read through. I'm not gonna go through why because we're running out of time, but so the purpose, in my opinion, is basically to show you how to keep yourself holy. But I think there may be another purpose, and that's healthy, because the stuff that he talks about is very health prominent too. You just don't touch dead bodies because there are contaminants involved, especially back then when their preservation techniques were different, right? But dead animals, certain fluids from the body are just not good. You keep those away from you. There was a reason beyond the symbolic for the purity that he wanted to maintain. Remember, he's creating a people group for a purpose, right? So he's got to keep them holy and healthy if he can, so that that purpose can be fulfilled later on. You got to keep them alive so that purpose can be fulfilled. Okay. And then that second half of purity describes moral cleanliness, things like sexual purity, religious purity, all those kind of things, right? So then right in the middle of that is this Day of Atonement thing, which I want to make sure we get to, okay? Right in the middle is the Day of Atonement. Let's see where we are. Okay. All right. That's chapter 16 and 17. Okay.
One moment.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Now, the Day of Atonement is still floating. What are you,
What's your
are you
phone?
listening to me?
Your phone,
Oh, did I say something to Siri?
apparently.
Something went wrong.
Yes.
It's a revelation.
I tell you, it's listening. Okay, so we still celebrate that, don't we? But Jews as Yom Kippur, okay? And it's always in October, usually the beginning of October, sometimes late September. It depends on when the new year begins. Rosh Hashanah is the new year. I think it's 5 or 10 days later is Yom Kippur. Maybe it's 5 days later is Yom Kippur, and there's another one a few days after that. Okay. What's the one after that? Oh, Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles. So those are the 3 fall festivals. Usually mid to late September, they start Rosh Hashanah, New Year, Yom Kippur, Atonement, and Tabernacles is a Sukkot, it's also called, is this celebration of the time they were in the desert, basically. A lot of those are just mentioned throughout the Old Testament. The purpose of the Day of Atonement is to cleanse everybody. That's what atonement means. Somebody's going to pay for your sin for you. Okay, but it has to be symbolic. Right? They put on new clothes, they got to put on their best clothes, basically brand new clothing, right? They cleanse themselves really well, take a good bath, cleanse everything, put on some brand new clothes, and then go to the festival where 2 goats are going to be sacrificed, basically in your behalf, right? And it's all symbolic in a sense, right? So the first goat was killed, and then its blood was sprinkled in the holy house of God. This goat cleansed the temple for a year, right? So the first of the 2 goats is killed specifically for sin, okay? And its purpose was to cleanse the house of God in case any sin had occurred in the house of God or any unholiness had entered the house of God, okay? That's the first goat. Give me a second because I can see you furiously writing. Okay. Now, the second goat, this goat is not killed. You've heard the term scapegoat? That's what this goat is, okay? The scapegoat is the goat where the priests would lay their hands on the goat and they would transfer the sins of Israel onto this goat. But instead of killing the goat, they would force it out into the wilderness. They wouldn't kill it, they would just leave it and let it go out into the wilderness and live its life or die or be eaten or whatever happens to the goat out there, right? So the first goat is killed, the second goat is not. It receives all the sin and leaves and goes out into the wilderness. Okay. Let's talk about our 3 questions. We have 10 minutes left. I think we're okay, right? So how is this book important in a particular time? Look at that one. Here's some thoughts, all right? Some thoughts that us on the spiritual formation team, commentators, that kind of thing. The Jews in Exodus, when you came out of Egypt, and then afterwards, had not developed a relationship with God like their ancestors. So I asked this question, how would you characterize Abraham's relationship with God? That is, I do want to close that one. How would you, and then think in terms of Jacob and Joseph too, how would you characterize their relationships with God? Give me any thoughts.
Well, with Abraham, it was new,
Oh,
because before that, Abraham's family worshipped other gods.
yeah,
And
Exactly.
so now all of a sudden Yahweh is talking to Abraham and saying, hey, I'm calling you to this new land.
yeah,
I mean, it's this new thing,
yeah. I mean, he understood the concept of a God,
right?
but a God like Yahweh speaking to him was a different endeavor into worship completely. and then to give instructions, right?
Right, and for Abraham to obey right away.
And it was really childlike. It was mostly simple instructions, not,
Go,
yeah, just go. One word, just go. I'll show you later. Where am I supposed to go? I'll show you. Don't worry about that. Just go. Like that. That was kind of the instruction given to Abraham. Or marry this person, or you're going to have this child. Right? Very simple, day-to-day, things we always do. Given to Abraham. Jacob, what about him? A little bit different, right?
A little deceiving.
Huh?
A little deceiving.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, Jacob was a tricky one.
Well,
You're right.
we never know how. I mean, obviously, the descendants of Adam and Eve, knew something, you got Cain and Abel, but obviously there was more kids and, when Noah and the ark, I mean, basically the world starts over again with only the family of Noah,
Yeah.
who were all worshipers. And so we don't know where it went,
Yeah,
from there.
right. Exactly. Yeah, that's a fair point. We don't really know for sure. Think about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So you basically, by Jacob, you're on the third generation of these family line who had worshipped and heard from God. And Jacob hears from God too. In fact, at one point, literally wrestles God. Literally, is in a wrestling match with God. So the relationship is advanced beyond these simple instructions to 2 generations later with Jacob. Now you've got very detailed, I want you to do this, and I want you to marry this person, I want you to, that kind of thing. And then when you get to Joseph, now he's got visions, right? Right, so you're given vision stuff, prophecies of the future. So the relationship is advancing as the people advance, right? So, but you've still got this holiness and unholiness problem. Okay. I already see them. So I like, this works for me, and I don't know if it works for you, but the insulation of Israel, the way the Hebrews were taken out of Egypt, brought into the desert, sort of, they're kind of baking together in the desert. They're in there together, developing a society and that kind of thing. They're given these really specific laws and rituals and purity, events and that type of thing. I think of it in terms of God securing, for lack of a better term, a womb for the coming Messiah. Okay, so he's going to eventually save all of mankind through this people group. He's already known this ahead of time, right? In fact, he said to you, let me see if I have it down here. He said to Abraham, all nations will be blessed because of you. He's talking about Christ, right? He's talking about Christ is going to bless you and bless the world because of you and your people as they grow. So he's got to keep these people pure. He's got to keep them clean and healthy. He's got to get them to a land, all right? He's got a purpose in mind, and he's got to keep them safe and clean until they get there, because they're going to be the womb out of which Christ is going to come, okay? All right, so how does this fit into God's redemptive plan? Creation, redemption, recreation, etc. God is introducing a new kind of nation, not governed by this capricious manufactured gods, but by a personal and holy being. Okay, the gods of Egypt, the gods of Canaan, would not by any stretch of the imagination be called holy. The things that they did and required of you were not good things for your benefit, right? Molech demanding your youngest children to be killed. You have a baby, but you got to give it up. Molech wants it, right? That kind of thing. This is a new kind of God, not this malevolent God who's going to demand things of you, but this God who's trying to secure for you something. I want to be in a relationship with you, but you have to be holy to be in this relationship. So I'm going to make you holy. Here's some rules. Here's some ideas. Stay holy, and we'll be in relationship. Okay. So Leviticus then shows them how they are going to be set apart in that sense. As God wants to set apart, and God himself is set apart, the only holy God sort of thing. Now he's going to make you a set apart nation too, right? Then this final question, how does this point toward Messiah? Okay. Leviticus shows that we need a savior, okay? And then it details about what that savior might look like. For instance, holiness, cleanliness, purity. This coming messianic figure is going to have to somehow fulfill those things. He's going to have to be holy, be clean. He's going to have to provide a way for you to be holy and clean, that kind of thing, okay? So just as the rituals demand sacrifice, so do our sins. A temporary sacrifice can't suffice. We need longer lasting solutions. Can you imagine if we still lived under the Levitical law and had to give goats and bulls and birds all the time for our sin, now that there are 8 billion people on earth, right? How many cattle are we going to be killing every year? How many bulls are we going to destroy and goats are we going to destroy every year? And by the way, it's only symbolic and it doesn't last because you got to redo it all the time, right? So there has to be a better solution, some way to provide a single sacrifice forever, right? He's going to show them in Leviticus the futility of continuing to sacrifice over and over and over and over again. And they're going to want somebody who can just say, okay, I'll take care of it completely right now. Let me just deal with this right now. Okay. So it's going to show that we need a longer lasting solution, a better solution than constantly killing. Okay. The feasts show us that Messiah's provision brings joy, meaning that what he's going to accomplish is going to bring joy. Remember that when we die, we study the afterlife. One of the first things we do is the marriage supper of the Lamb. We're going to have a giant feast. First thing that happens. So it's going to be a big dinner. Probably going to be really good. Okay. By the way, this is just an interesting side note, but something I've been personally studying, that Jesus's fulfillment of the spring festivals, which are those 4 listed: Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, and Feast of Weeks. Christ, when Jesus came, he fulfilled those literally exactly to the day. Killed on Passover, right? Raised again on first fruits, the day of first fruits. Passover, the very next day after Passover was the beginning of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, where yeast is removed. Catch the symbolism? Yeast is removed, okay? The first fruits of resurrection was the day after that. First fruits. But to us, it was the 3rd day or the day of resurrection, okay? And then the Feast of Weeks began right at that same time, which concluded with the end of one season and the beginning of another season at Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit came. Old season's over, we're in a new season now. See the symbolism? Okay. So the question I asked, just for you to think about, is will he also fulfill the fall festivals to the day? He's coming back, remember? So think in terms of the fall festivals and what's he going to do what's he going to accomplish there? Couple more. The priesthood, a perfect intermediary between God and man, is needed. Ideally, one who can relate to both parties. Okay, interesting. If you want mediation in this world, the best mediation is somebody who can relate to both of the people being represented, who can understand. So now you've got a conflict between man, who's temporal and material, and God, who's immaterial. You got to have somebody who can relate to both. There's your Messiah. A man or a God who puts on manhood, puts on body and matter, becomes a man, right? And then can represent both parties. He understands both parties perfectly well, okay? And then purity, and that's that both the body and the soul have to be clean, okay? The body is relatively easy, but how do you clean your soul? Okay, if you want eternal union with an eternal God, your soul has to be clean, not just your body. So now you have to enter in somebody who can do that, who can clean your soul as well as your body, okay? Jesus repeats that in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, when he talks about, you've heard that it was said, and then he goes through all these things. Don't commit adultery. Well, I'm telling you, don't even do it in your head. Don't even think about adultery. He's relating to you the extremeness of the problem. And that's that your body and your soul are both have to be clean, okay? So somebody else is gonna have to step in and make us clean, right? And then finally, the Day of Atonement, you notice those goats represent Messiah's removal of sin from the world. In the same way, the goat is sacrificed on the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. Two types of forgiveness, one temporary, one that handles the body and cleanses the temple, right? And then one final, okay? So the final one is the removal of sin, and then the goat disappears. It shows that one day sin is going to be removed from our lives completely, not just in a temporal way, but it won't even be a factor anymore. When we enter into our final union with God, you won't be able to sin. Or maybe a better way to say it is you'll be able not to sin, right? So it's not even going to be a factor. That's what's shown by that goat. Okay. And then the final thing, my final point here is the interesting way that Numbers 1 starts. Can somebody read Numbers 1 for me?
The Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting.
Yeah. You see catch the difference? So at the beginning of Leviticus, you see what he saw. He spoke to him from the tent. Now he's speaking to him in the tent. Now there's union. Moses and Jesus are together. Okay. Moses and God are together in Jesus. Okay. So now you see sort of the way that rift has been filled. Right there. Now you've got the cross giving you a bridge for you to enter into the relationship. Okay. I think that's it. Any final thoughts, questions? We're almost on time. That was a lot, right?
That's good. I'm gonna go walk through the video now.
So John probably left because he had to already start watching or reading numbers. So, okay, good. No questions. That's good. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Dave.
Yeah, you're welcome.